Okay, next topic is systematic sampling. In systematic sampling, the sample units are selected from the population at equal intervals in terms of time and space. The selection of sample using systematic sampling method is very simple. Okay, from a population n units, a sample of n units will be selected by following certain steps. Let us see what are the steps followed in systematic sampling for selecting a sample. First one is arrange all the units in the population in an order by giving serial numbers from 1 to n. Suppose 100 units are there in a population, then arrange the units from 1 to 100. Sampling interval, that is k, is determined by k is equal to number of units in the population divided by number of units desired in the sample. Okay, in our example, the number of units in the population is 100. Suppose a sample of 20 units is taken, then 100 divided by 20, that is equal to 5. So 5 is the sampling interval. Then select the first sample unit at random from the first sampling interval. So we have already arranged the population units from 1 to 100. Then from the first interval, that means from 1 to 5, select one unit at random. Suppose the selected item is 4. From 1 to 5, the selected item is one item is selected at random. If the selected item is 4, the next item will be for plus 5. Interval is 5 for plus 5. Ninth item will be selected, and the next item will be 9 plus 5, that is 14th item will be selected, and so on. Select the subsequent sample units at equal regular intervals. The next method is stratified sampling. In this method, the entire population is divided into a number of groups, or it is also known as strata. Once the whole universe is divided into different groups, sample is selected from each group. Total universe is divided into different groups, and a sample will be selected from each homogeneous groups. Each stratum must be as homogeneous as possible. So first of all, a heterogeneous population is there, and the population is divided into various groups on the basis of their homogeneity, and from each stratum a sample will be selected. There are two approaches to decide the sample size from each stratum. First method is proportional stratified sample on the basis of the proportion of stratum. Second one is disproportionate stratified sample. These are the two approaches used to decide the sample size from each stratum. Then now we are going to discuss what are the advantages of stratified sampling. First one is stratified sampling avoids unequal representation, which is the main demerit of both simple and systematic random sampling methods. Second one is it is more precise and a great extent avoids bias. Third advantage is that since the sample size can be small in this method, it saves a lot of time, money, and other resources for data collection, because the total population is divided into different groups. So the selection of sample is very easy, and the money and other resources required for data collection is very low. Then now the disadvantages. If correct stratification is not done, then the method cannot be successfully employed. Second one, there may be bias resulting from overrepresentation of one stratum or underrepresentation of another. So different strata are there and samples are selected from each stratum. Okay, and there may be bias resulting from overrepresentation of one stratum or underrepresentation of another stratum. Next one is preparing a stratified list is a difficult task as far as the researcher is concerned, as the list may not be readily available. Next one, if the stratum is not defined clearly, it is very difficult to decide in which stratum a particular case is to be placed. Then now the third method, cluster sampling. In cluster sampling, the population is divided into different groups called clusters and then select a sample of clusters using simple random sampling. So in cluster sampling, the total population is divided into different groups and each group is called cluster and then select a sample of clusters using simple random sampling. From the clusters, we select a sample of clusters using simple random sampling. One cluster is selected at random. Okay. This sampling is widely used for geographical studies of many issues. Area sampling. Area sampling is a special form of cluster sampling. Here, the sample items are clustered over a geographical basis. When studying some marketing issue in a city, a researcher might divide the city into number of blocks, localities or areas. Then select a sample of few blocks and conduct a census of the households with each block sampled. Okay, in such a case, we select a sample of a few blocks and conduct a census of households with each block sampled. After selecting the areas, one may again choose a few households from each area. After selecting the areas, one may again choose a few households from each area. Then multi-stage sampling. So multi-stage sampling simply means combining the sampling methods to suit the sampling needs in the most efficient and effective manner. Okay, so in multi-stage sampling, we combine different sampling methods to suit the sampling needs in the most efficient and effective manner. So in multi-stage sampling, it is carried out in different stages using different sampling techniques. Then now we are going to discuss non-random sampling methods. First one is convenience sampling. Second one is judgment sampling. Third one, quota sampling. And fourth one is snowboard sampling. So we are going to discuss one by one in detail. First one is convenience sampling. It is also called accidental sampling or haphazard sampling. It is a method of obtaining a sample that is most conveniently available to the researcher. So this is a method of obtaining a sample that is most conveniently available to the researcher. For example, a television program intends to get a quick reading of public opinion on sensitive issues like budget, election, price rise of any particular item, etc. Then for that purpose, The interview is conducted according to the convenience of the interviewer. The sample may consist of a taxi driver, a bank executive, a college student, a housewife, etc. So in some cases, we have to follow convenience sampling method, even though this method lacks randomness. Judgment sampling. In judgment sampling, a researcher puts his judgment as to whether to include a unit or not in the sample. That means an item is included in the sample depends upon the judgment of the researcher. Whether to include or exclude a particular item purely depends upon the judgment of the researcher. In this method, the researcher is supposed to exercise some judgment about the usefulness of the sample selected. Quota sampling. Under this method, the samples are selected non-randomly according to some fixed quota. So according to this method, the samples are selected non-randomly according to some fixed quota. A fixed quota will be decided in advance and a sample will be selected according to that particular fixed quota. The characteristics on which the quota will be based may be gender, age, education, race, religion, etc. While selecting a sample of 100 people, quota for men may be 60, for women may be 40. So the total number of men should not exceed 60 and the total number of women should not exceed 40. So a quota is fixed. A sample of 100 respondents are required and a quota is fixed 60 men and 40 women. The researcher will not include any more unit from the subgroup. Not more than 60 men and not more than 40 women are included in the list. Snowboard sampling. Under this method, the researcher makes initial contact with a small group of people who meet the criteria for inclusion in his study. Okay, first he contacts one person or one or two persons. Then he asks them to recommend others they know who also meet the criteria. Then the investigator asks the person to recommend others who also meet the criteria. Okay, so the first respondent will recommend one or two name of one or two persons. So we will expand the list by using this particular method. Snowboard sampling especially useful when snowboard sampling is especially useful when one tries to reach population that are inaccessible or hard to find. So in such cases, we can use snowboard sampling method. Next term is sampling error. Statistically speaking, the characteristics of the population are known as parameters. Okay. So parameter means the characteristics of the population, mean, median, etc. calculated from the population are known as population parameter. In sampling, these parameters are estimated or inferred on the basis of sample data. So the characteristics of the sample are known as, or the estimates are known as sample statistics. Okay. For example, sample mean, sample median, etc. are called sample statistics. Sampling error indicates the precision with which a sample statistic measures the underlying population parameter. So sampling error indicates the precision with which a sample statistic measures the underlying population parameter. The non-sampling errors. The non-sampling errors arise from faulty research design and mistakes in executing research. The non-sampling errors arise from faulty research design and mistakes in executing research. And the non-sampling errors may be broadly classified as: first one is respondent errors, and the second one is administrative errors. Okay, thank you.